The thought of their tanks heading to Eastern Europe brings back painful collective memories for the Germans. This was the Battle of Kursk, which saw thousands of Nazi and Soviet tanks fight in fields not far from the current conflict in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands died in this battle alone. The horrors of the Second World War, the horrors they inflicted on their neighbours, have guided German foreign policy ever since.
So, and the German tank, I would say, is really the symbolism of the first part of the Second World War, the Wehrmacht overrunning Europe. And we all know what then comes. So therefore, in a way, you could say it's a very strong symbol.
After the war, the Germans said never again. The guiding principles in Berlin were Ostpolitik, East politics, and Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. The idea was that by engaging with Russia, by building economic links, war in Europe could be avoided. But the invasion of Ukraine showed that was an illusion. Chancellor Olaf Scholz ripped up decades of consensus with his Zeitenwende, turning point speech. Although some do question quite how radical a shift that represented.
So they will always see what the partners are doing. And one of the German reference points in their security policy is never alone. So one is never again, never be perpetrator, never war again. But if the alliance goes to war, or the partners goes to war, then Germany follows, but not from the front, but more from the rear.
That reluctance fed through to decisions at the start of the war about arming Ukraine. Germany was mocked and criticised in equal measure for offering to send helmets. Since then, there's been growing pressure to arm Ukraine, including with heavy weapons like the Leopard 2 tank, and to allow others to do the same. Today, that finally happened.
The Leopard tank is the most in demand by Ukrainians because it is relatively easy to operate and maintain, and it exists in large numbers. There are something like 2,000 in Europe, and that means that there are plenty of spares, plenty of maintenance expertise, plenty of maintenance facilities. So it's the easiest thing to give to Ukraine that gives them advanced capability in a supportable way.
But the Leopard 2 isn't the only tank being promised. The US have said they will send Abrams. The UK are sending these, the massive Challenger 2. The French could send their Leclercs. And while the Ukrainians say they do welcome all the assistance, there are real problems from having so many different tanks all operating on the same battlefield.
No nation wants to operate different fleets of tanks because these are really big and complex machines, and they require their own supply chains for spares and their own maintenance expertise. And where we've ended up in Ukraine is that Ukraine will operate the M1 Abrams with its own supply chain, the Leopard with its own supply chain, the Challenger with its own supply chain, and require to train people specifically to maintain those types of tanks.
So what about the numbers? Well, the Ukrainians say that they need 300 main battle tanks like this to turn the tide of this war. So, what's being offered? The UK is sending 14 main battle tanks. The US 31. Germany also 14. When you add in other promises, it comes to just over 130. Significant, but short of what the Ukrainians say they need. And there is another problem.
They have to get to Ukraine. That's the easy part. The hard part is training Ukrainians to fight the tank and repair them and refuel them. That is going to take some months to get a critical mass of each type. And Russia is likely to be ready to mount its own offensive in Ukraine this summer before Ukraine has assembled this newly offered equipment and got it ready to fight.
This is an original piece of the Berlin Wall. And in many ways, the relationship between Russia and Germany helped shape the 20th century. It is already having an impact in the 21st. 80 years on from the Battle of Kursk, and we may soon see German tanks heading east again, although this time the context could not be more different. There is no overstating the symbolic importance of this moment. Whether it will prove decisive on the battlefield is another matter entirely.